Changing gears to my next guest now, one who will meet with Amy Coney Barrett, unlike 6 Democrats who have said they will not. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, his brand new book, One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Can Change History. Senator, great to have you here.
David, great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, and talk about appropriate timing. You and I, over the years, have had conversations about the importance of the Supreme Court, about the importance of a constitution, of a constitutional view of things, an originalist view, and the Democrats have a different view. So a single seat, in this case, Amy Coney Barrett, that changes history, but I wonder in what respect for the court.
Well, that's exactly right. The book One Vote Away, which came out this morning, what it does is it does a deep dive into the Supreme Court. And as you know, before I was in the Senate, I was a Supreme Court litigator. That's what I did for a living, is argue cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Each chapter in the book addresses a different constitutional liberty. So there's a chapter on free speech. There's a chapter on religious liberty. There's a chapter on the Second Amendment. There's a chapter on U.S. sovereignty. There's a chapter on democracy and elections, and it goes into Bush versus Gore and what happened there. I was part of the legal team representing George W. Bush in that case. It was the last contested presidential election, went to the Supreme Court twice. We could easily see that play out again this November with contested elections as well. And in every one of the chapters, what I do is tell war stories. I behind the scenes, try to take the reader behind the curtain. What's really happening at the court? Who are the justices? What's the drama playing out? Who are the litigants? And many of the landmark cases I personally litigated. So I tell the story from the perspective of someone arguing the cases and in the courtroom. And it's designed to really make them real and come alive. You don't have to be a lawyer to enjoy the book, but it helps you understand really what the stakes are. And so many of the fundamental liberties we have, so many of the landmark cases were decided 5-4, which means we're just one vote away from seeing those liberties taken from us.
One of the points that I repeat for the audience is that you have to pay attention to the case before the court. And this is where you fit perfectly into this interview, or I guess the interview and you coincide. I think we need to educate people more in this country. Look at the case. Look at what has been brought before the court. Not all the ancillary things, whether they should or should not be there, is not up for debate. It's what's there. Do you think the American people look at it in that way enough? And if not, how do we get them to pay attention?
Well, I think it's important to understand what's being decided at the court, and that's what this book is really trying to do. For example, the chapter on free speech, one of the cases it dives into is the Citizens United case. Now, a whole lot of folks have heard of Citizens United, but don't really know what it was about. Citizens United, the fundamental question there was whether we as American citizens have the right to criticize politicians. What happened in that case is Citizens United is a nonprofit organization that made a movie that was critical of Hillary Clinton. And the Obama Department of Justice went after them. They wanted to be able to fine them for making a movie critical of Hillary Clinton. At the oral argument, Justice Sam Alito asked the lawyer for the Obama Justice Department, under your theory of the case, would the federal government be able to ban books? Would it be able to ban books that are critical of politicians? And the Obama DOJ came back and said, yes, we have the power to ban books. Now, thankfully, the Supreme Court rejected that radical view, and concluded that we as Americans can criticize our elected officials. The vote in Citizens United was 5-4. 4 of the justices were prepared to seriously undermine our free speech rights. And I'll tell you, both Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden have pledged to nominate justices who would vote to overturn Citizens United and take away your and my right to criticize our elected officials. That's a real threat to the liberties we enjoy as Americans.
And yet from that case, as you and I know, and I think we've probably discussed before, that decision took 4 years to make it to the rulemaking component. So the liberty was still a threat even after the court decision. To move in the court into the right position, I, as you might remember, a fan of Antonin Scalia.
Sure.
I like the originalist. I like those that look at the Constitution, and I respect the fact that we have a legislative body, which you've talked about many times, that has a responsibility. How do you see the balance now between the legislative and the judicial, and why that one vote would matter when we have, in many cases, a legislative that will not complete the mission to get the law changed properly? And as this president has often said, do your job.
Well, the left, really starting in the 1960s, decided to use the courts to try to advance their agenda. And they were frustrated because their agenda substantively was so radical that the American people didn't agree with it. And when it came to an actual vote, when it came to democracy, they lost. So they began instead pushing liberal judicial activists to the bench who would simply decree whatever outcome they wanted. And it's fundamentally lawless. The job of the Supreme Court is not to decide policy issues. Policy issues, there are all sorts of issues on which you or I could agree or disagree, and we can have substantive debates. But what has happened is over and over again, 5 unelected judges, these philosopher kings in black robes, have said, we the people don't have the power to decide, that you voters are just peasants, and we're going to take the choice off the table. You mentioned one of the chapters is on school choice. I am deeply passionate about school choice. I've been fighting for school choice for 30 years. I think it is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Now, I also think school choice is a policy issue, that the right place to fight it is in the elected legislatures, is in Congress. I've had major victories for school choice on the Senate floor. That's the right place to fight it. But the Supreme Court, one of the cases I talk about is Zellman versus Simmons-Harris. The Supreme Court, by a vote of just 5-4, upheld Ohio's school choice program. There were 4 justices ready to strike it down and say the Constitution prohibits giving scholarships to low-income kids to attend their choice of schools. That's a radical position. Joe Biden, if he is appointing justices, would readily appoint the 5th, which could have the effect of striking down every single school choice program in America. It's an example of just how many precious liberties are hanging in the balance.
And with that, I have to ask you about Amy Coney Barrett, because with her nomination, and if successfully voted and affirmed by the Senate, she will change the court to a 6-3 conservative balance, six conservative judges. And, I say this, Senator, to many out there, that we're talking about conservative in the sense, not of politics, but of how you view the Constitution, the document as it's written, the laws as they exist, and the ability to amend it and the legislative responsibilities you and I are talking about. I think that is an important moment in our history right now, because this will affect us for decades. Your view of Amy Coney Barrett, the attacks on her, trying to cast her faith and her belief as somehow an overriding factor on her ability to judge the case that's before her.
Well, I think Judge Barrett is a strong choice. As you mentioned, I'll be sitting down and meeting with her this afternoon. I don't think it's right to say, though, that if she's confirmed, there will be a 6-3 conservative or constitutionalist majority. If you look at John Roberts, the Chief Justice, he has galloped to the left. I think John Roberts has become the new Sandra Day O'Connor. It's deeply disappointing. I've known John for 25 years. We were both clerks for Chief Justice William Rehnquist, and I think it is a pattern. One of the things that I do in the book, One Vote Away, the final chapter is on Supreme Court nominations, and it traces the history of them, starting with Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it's really striking. Democrats get this right almost 100% of the time. Almost 100% of the time, their nominees vote exactly as Democrats would want them over and over and over again in virtually every case. Republicans, we don't even bat 500. We're really bad. Republican presidents are terrible at this. Many of the worst judicial activists were put on the bench by Republicans. Earl Warren, Bill Brennan, John Paul Stevens, David Souter, Harry Blackmun, the author of Roe versus Wade. Every one of those were Republican appointees. And what I trace is it's not just flipping a coin. It's not that we have bad luck. There is a clear, discernible pattern, a difference between those justices who stayed faithful to their oaths, stayed faithful to the Constitution, and those who haven't. If you look at the justices who stayed faithful, Antonin Scalia, Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, my former boss, Chief Justice William Rehnquist, every one of them had a long, proven record of being a conservative, being a constitutionalist, often serving in the executive branch, standing for the Constitution, and this is the most critical thing, David, being excoriated for it, being blasted by the press, being in the fiery heat of the cauldron and not wavering, not blinking. That's what has held steady. On the other hand, every time a Republican goes with a stealth nominee, someone who's avoided controversy, every time it turns out to be a disaster. And so I think we should demand a proven record, and I try to lay out how Republican presidents and Republican Senates should approach that issue.
And they should look for that record. I'm with you on that. We want to know as much as we can about the decision, the types of decision, and that case before that nominee at any level. The book, One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. It comes out today by my guest, Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas. The rumors of Texas's demise, I would say, are overrated. How go things in the state of Texas?
Well, I think Texas is a real battleground. I believe we're going to win Texas. I think President Trump will win Texas. I think John Cornyn will be reelected to the Senate from Texas, and I think we'll keep Texas red. But that being said, Texas is getting much closer. The hard left is energized. They hate Donald Trump. This Supreme Court vacancy has taken them. They were already filled with rage, but to borrow a phrase from Spinal Tap, this took them to 11. They are ready to crawl over broken glass. And so it's our job to make sure that everybody else shows up. Those who believe in common sense, in low taxes, low regulations, and lots of jobs. Those who believe in the rule of law and protecting our families and keeping us safe. Those who believe in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. We've got to make sure we show up because the other side is going to show up in big, big numbers.
Yeah, and that's a big question for the American people out there. As you know, voter turnout has been an issue in the past, but conservatives typically turn out late and they come out and vote in person. We have an issue with COVID-19 now, Senator, and many are concerned. I urge people to vote properly in person. If we can go to Walmart, vote safely. If you have serious issues, absentee ballot. But the Democrats are pushing mail-in balloting. And it's not about even the ballot potential or the fraud potential. It's that the post office is already flawed in processing mail. So if we infuse this system where we have an influx of hundreds of thousands per state and millions around the country, I believe in protecting every American's right to vote. And it seems as if the Democrats want to make the system not work. What say you?
Well, it injects enormous uncertainty and the potential for chaos in this election. One of the chapters in the book, One a Vote Away, talks about Bush versus Gore. And in Bush versus Gore, we had a contested presidential election. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The first time we won unanimously. The second time, the vote was 5-4. It was 5-4 where the Supreme Court said the votes have been counted. George W. Bush has won. All 4 times the votes have been counted. Under the law, enough is enough. But yet at the time, and I was part of the team representing Bush in that case, we had 36 days of chaos, of uncertainty, where the country and the world didn't know who the next president was going to be. I think there is the potential for it to be much, much worse this time. Joe Biden has already said if he doesn't win, he intends to challenge the legitimacy of the election. And I fully expect, if he doesn't win, to see him file lawsuits in not just one state like Florida, but 3, 4, 5 states, multiple jurisdictions, and with mail-in votes coming in days or weeks later, with fraud, with uncertainty, with litigation, we could see an enormous period of chaos. It's part of the reason the nomination of Judge Barrett is so important, because if the Senate doesn't confirm her before Election Day, we would have an 8-justice Supreme Court. An 8-justice Supreme Court can divide 4-4. And under the Constitution, an equally divided court can decide nothing. It has no authority to decide anything, which means we could see conflicting Court of Appeals decisions, utter chaos, and no resolution. I think we have a real responsibility to avoid that constitutional crisis, and it's why I am confident that the Senate is going to confirm Judge Barrett and do it by the end of the month so that we have a full and operating Supreme Court in place to resolve whatever election disputes there are. And David, you pointed this out earlier, but it's important to underscore. It's not that we want a court to rule for one candidate or another, for the candidate I favor or a different candidate. We want a court to resolve any legal disputes and ensure that we follow the law and follow the Constitution. And that's the way our democratic system is meant to operate.
Well, it is a good day to have this discussion. Good luck to you in your meeting later on this afternoon with Amy Coney Barrett, and also on the book which comes out today, the book One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History, by my guest, Senator Ted Cruz. Great to have you on, and hopefully we'll talk around the election time.
David, thank you. The book One Vote Away, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you get books, and I think it's both interesting and fun and gives you the inside perspective on the court. You don't have to be a lawyer to find it worthwhile. And if you want to understand what's happening at the court, if you want to understand what the stakes are in the election in 2000, and if you want to understand really what's going on in the epic battle right now over Judge Barrett and the Supreme Court vacancy, One Vote Away, I think it'll be both interesting and fun, and hopefully learn something about the issues at stake.
And for court wonks like myself, always fun to read. Thank you, sir.
Take care. God bless.